The air in the room felt suffocating. Time moved too slowly, every second dragging like an eternity. The soft beep of the monitor beside her bed was the only sound, a constant reminder of how little time was left. My mother lay there, her once vibrant eyes now clouded and distant. The life that had filled this room and this house was slowly slipping away. I could feel it, a kind of emptiness that was settling into my bones. I didn't want to be here, not in this sterile room, not in this space where I could feel the very essence of life fading. It was supposed to be different. She wasn't supposed to leave me yet. We still had so much to do, so much to say, so many moments to share. I had always imagined we'd grow old together. She'd be the one telling me stories of her youth, of the things I didn't quite understand yet. The way she used to laugh, the way she held my hand when I was young, her soft whispers of comfort when life felt too big. That was the mother I knew, the one who was always there, the one who would never leave. But life wasn't fair, and time had a way of reminding you that nothing was ever certain. Even the strongest bonds could be broken by the cold, indifferent march of time. I had tried so hard to fight it, to hold on to her for just a little longer. I'd spent hours at the hospital, sitting at her bedside, my hand holding hers, whispering words of encouragement that I knew were futile. She wasn't getting better, and I wasn't ready to accept it. I wasn't ready to say goodbye. The nurses had told me to prepare myself. They said it could happen any moment now, that the signs were all there. But how do you prepare for something like this? How do you accept that the person who had been the center of your world, who had shaped your very being, was no longer going to be a part of your life? I stared at her, watching the rise and fall of her chest with each shallow breath. There were no words left. I had spoken everything I could think of, every I love you, every thank you, every I'll miss you. It didn't feel like enough. Nothing could ever be enough when faced with this kind of loss. There were no words to fill the emptiness that threatened to consume me. Her frail hand twitched, and my heart skipped a beat. Was it the last movement she'd make? Would this be the moment? But then, I saw her eyes flicker open, just for a moment, and the faintest of smiles touched her lips. It was the smile I had known my whole life, the one that reassured me, the one that told me everything would be okay. "Mom," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Can you hear me?" She nodded slowly, her hand tightening around mine, just a little, as if she was trying to hold on. And then she spoke, her voice barely more than a breath, but it was enough. "You never have to say goodbye." The words felt like a promise, one that didn't belong in this room, at this moment. My heart stuttered in my chest. How could she say that? How could she make me believe that, when everything around us said otherwise? Tears blurred my vision, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. The grief, the sorrow, the fear of losing her, it all came crashing down at once. But then I remembered her words, faint as they were. "You never have to say goodbye." It didn't make sense, but something in me, something deep down, knew she was telling me the truth. She wasn't gone yet, not in the way I feared, not yet. I leaned in closer, my face inches from hers. "I don't want to say goodbye," I whispered, the tears streaming down my face. Her hand gently squeezed mine again, and she smiled, the faintest of smiles, as if she had all the time in the world to reassure me. "You don't have to," she murmured, her voice growing fainter. "I'll always be here." I didn't understand what she meant, not fully, but in that moment, it didn't matter. The room seemed to shift, just a little. It felt as though she was telling me something more, something that would make sense in time. But time was running out, and I could feel it. And so, we sat there, her hand in mine, the world outside the room moving forward without us. I wasn't ready to say goodbye. I didn't want to. But she had spoken those words that made me think, just for a moment, that maybe, just maybe, there was something beyond this moment. Something that would keep us together, even when she was gone. As the minutes ticked by, I didn't know if she would speak again. I didn't know how long I had left with her, but I promised myself, right then and there, that I wouldn't forget her words. I wouldn't forget her smile. And I wouldn't forget that, somehow, she had found a way to make me believe that saying goodbye didn't have to be the end. Maybe, just maybe, it was only the beginning. The days after her passing felt like I was wading through a dense fog. Time, once something I could measure by the ticking of clocks and the rhythm of daily routines, had become an endless void. The world moved around me, people laughed, spoke, lived, but it felt like I was standing still, paralyzed by the weight of my grief. The space she left behind in the house was palpable, as if her absence had carved itself into the walls. It was everywhere, in the empty chair by the window where she used to sit, in the kitchen where she would hum while preparing dinner, in the faint smell of lavender that lingered in the rooms, her favorite scent. I thought I would be stronger. I had prepared myself for this moment, had tried to be brave, but nothing could have truly prepared me for the reality of it. She was gone, and the world didn't care. People had their own lives to live, their own routines to follow. But I was left to pick up the pieces of a shattered heart, struggling to find my footing in a world that seemed to have lost its meaning. There were moments when I would find myself in the most unexpected places, sitting in the garden, where we used to watch the birds fly by, or walking past her favorite bookstore, and I could almost feel her presence. It was as though her memory had woven itself into the very fabric of everything around me. And yet, despite the familiarity, there was something strange about it all. It was a ghostly kind of presence, the kind that never fully reveals itself, but stays just out of reach, like a shadow in the corner of your eye. I couldn't escape it. I didn't want to. It was as if every corner of this house was a piece of her, every object a reminder of the woman who had raised me, who had shaped me into the person I was. I spent hours sifting through old photographs, each one a frozen moment in time, capturing her smile, her laughter, her warmth. There she was, in every snapshot, as vibrant and full of life as ever. But that was the cruelest part, seeing her so alive in those moments, knowing that she was no longer here to create new memories with me. I had to face it. She wasn't coming back. There was no miracle, no sudden reversal of fate that would bring her back to me. And yet, despite the finality of it all, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was still here, in the silence, in the spaces between my thoughts. I could feel her. One evening, as the sun set and the golden light spilled across the floor, I found myself sitting on the couch where we used to watch old movies together. It was a simple habit, one of many that had once brought us comfort. I reached for the remote, out of sheer instinct, and pressed play on one of our favorite films. The familiar music filled the room, and for a brief moment, I was transported back to a time when she was sitting right next to me, her soft laugh echoing in the quiet room, her hand resting on mine. But then the silence came crashing in again. The reality of her absence hit me like a wave. The house felt empty, the movie felt distant, and I was once again reminded that she was never coming back. It was in that moment, in the stillness of the evening, that I heard it. A faint whisper, so soft that I almost thought it was just the wind or my imagination playing tricks on me. But it wasn't. It was her. "You're not alone," the voice said, so clear and unmistakable that it stopped me in my tracks. "I'm still here." I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The room felt colder, and yet, I couldn't shake the sensation that something or someone was present. I turned slowly, my eyes scanning the empty room. There was no one there, no physical form to speak of, but there was something, a presence, an energy that filled the space around me. I stood up, my breath shaky. "Mom," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Is that really you?" The response was silent, but I could feel it. I could feel her. It was as though she was close enough to touch, her spirit lingering in the very air I breathed. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't crazy. She was here, in some way I didn't understand, but she was here. It wasn't the first time I had felt this presence, but it was the first time I allowed myself to acknowledge it without fear. For so long, I had told myself that I was simply mourning, that grief had a way of distorting reality, of making us believe in things that weren't there. But this was different. This felt real. It wasn't a figment of my imagination, or a desperate wish. It was something deeper, something that connected us beyond the physical world. I slowly sat back down, my hands trembling. I closed my eyes, taking in the quiet of the room, allowing myself to feel her presence. It was as if she was reaching out to me, telling me that I wasn't alone in this. I had been so consumed by the pain of losing her that I had forgotten to listen, to feel. But now, I understood. She hadn't left me. She was still with me, in ways that defied explanation, in ways that transcended life and death. And as I sat there, alone but not truly alone, I realized that the grief, the heartache, the longing of it would ever truly disappear. But there was comfort in knowing that she hadn't truly left. Her love, her spirit, would always remain in the echoes of the past, in the quiet moments, in the spaces between thoughts. It was a strange kind of peace, the kind that didn't make the pain go away, but allowed me to accept it. And in that acceptance, I found a glimmer of hope. Maybe I didn't have to say goodbye after all. Maybe this was just the beginning of a new kind of relationship, one where love transcended time, space, and even death. The days that followed were filled with confusion and an overwhelming sense of loss. Grief had a way of sneaking up on me when I least expected it. One minute, I could be walking down the street, the sun shining brightly, and the next, the weight of my mother's absence would crash down on me. The simplest things like hearing a song she used to hum or passing by a place we once visited together would trigger a flood of emotions I couldn't control. But in the midst of it all, there was something else. A subtle shift, a quiet whisper in the back of my mind. It started as an inexplicable sensation, something I couldn't quite put into words. It wasn't like hearing her voice, but more like the feeling that she was near, close, but not quite there. It was the small things at first, the way the breeze would blow through the trees in the garden and bring with it a faint scent of lavender, the same scent she wore every day. Or the way the old, worn book we used to read together would suddenly fall off the shelf, as if nudged by invisible hands. At first, I convinced myself it was just my imagination. Grief, after all, had a way of playing tricks on the mind. But then there were the moments I couldn't ignore. It was late one evening, long after the sun had set, and I was sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the wall. My mind felt heavy, and I couldn't escape the sense that something was just out of reach, something I needed to understand, but couldn't. I closed my eyes, hoping for sleep, when I felt a soft, delicate touch on my arm. It wasn't a gust of wind or a trick of the shadows. It was as if someone was standing there beside me, gently brushing against my skin. My heart skipped a beat. I knew, without a doubt, that it wasn't just my imagination. I wasn't alone. Mom. The word escaped my lips before I could stop myself, barely a whisper in the dark room. I wasn't sure what I expected: an answer, a sign, anything, but there was nothing but the sound of my own breath filling the space around me. But then, like the faintest breath of wind, I heard it, a voice, soft, fragile, like a breath against my ear. I'm here. My body froze. It was her. It had to be. The voice was so familiar, so real, that it sent a shiver down my spine. I opened my eyes, my heart racing, but the room was still empty. The shadows on the walls remained unmoved. And yet, I could feel her, as though she was standing right beside me. I don't want to let go, I whispered into the silence, my voice shaky. I don't want to say goodbye. I'm not going anywhere, the voice answered, clear as day. You can never let go of me, because I will always be with you. Tears welled in my eyes, and my breath hitched. How could this be? How could I be hearing her voice again, so vividly, after everything? After the finality of her death, after the silence that followed her passing. I wanted to say something, anything, to ask her how this was possible, to demand answers, but I couldn't. I didn't need to. The love, the connection, the bond we shared, it was still here. It was in the air, in the very fabric of the room, in the faintest whisper that lingered in the silence. In that moment I understood something deeper than I had before. Death might separate us physically, but it didn't sever the connection between us. Love was something that transcended space and time, something that didn't end when the body ceased to exist. My mother had always said that love was eternal, but now I was beginning to truly believe it. She was still with me, in ways I couldn't explain, in ways that felt more real than anything I had ever known. The days passed, and I started to notice more signs, small things, like the way the radio would turn on at exactly the right moment, or how the lights would flicker just when I needed reassurance. It was as if she was speaking to me in the language of the world itself, using the tools around me to send her messages. And yet, with every whisper, with every subtle sign, there was still that gnawing feeling of loss. I had to face the truth. Even though my mother's presence lingered, her physical form was gone. She was no longer here to hold my hand, to sit beside me, to share a laugh over dinner. The ache of that absence was something I couldn't ignore, no matter how many whispers I heard, no matter how many signs appeared. But there was comfort in the whispers, in the moments when I felt her near, when I could almost feel her hand resting on mine. I knew that the love we shared hadn't disappeared. It had transformed into something more, something beyond the limits of this world. And that was enough to give me hope. I began to let go of the desperation I had felt in the days after her death. The overwhelming need to understand, to have answers, faded, replaced by a quiet trust. She had always told me that life didn't end with death. Now, I was beginning to understand what she had meant. She was still with me, in every whisper, in every sign, in every moment of peace that followed. The storm of grief. "I'm still here," I whispered into the quiet of the night, just as she had said to me, "and I'll never let you go." The days following my encounter with her voice felt different. The air in the house didn't feel as oppressive. The quiet wasn't so suffocating anymore, though the emptiness of her absence still lingered. I had expected to feel worse, to spiral deeper into my grief. But I didn't. It was as if a small spark of something had been reignited within me, something that had been buried under the weight of sorrow for so long. It wasn't that the pain was gone. It would never be gone. Grief doesn't disappear, not fully, but something had shifted in me. I could feel it in the way I moved through the world now, in the way I began to notice the smallest details of life again, the way the sun peeked through the clouds after a storm, the sound of children laughing in the park, the simple act of breathing in the crisp air of the morning. These things, which I had once taken for granted, now seemed like gifts. They were reminders that life continued, that I was still part of it. But there was more. I began to listen in ways I hadn't before. I started paying attention to the signs, the small moments that felt like messages. The radio turning on at just the right time. The wind picking up as if in answer to my questions. The flowers in the garden blooming just when I needed them to. I had dismissed these things before, chalking them up to coincidence or my imagination. But now, I knew better. Now, I understood that there was a language beyond the one we spoke, one that communicated through the world itself, and my mother, in some form, was still part of that language. I found myself going back to the places that once held meaning for us. The old cafe where we used to have Sunday brunch, the park bench by the lake where we'd sit for hours, just talking, watching the world go by. I had avoided these places for a while, not ready to face the memories, not ready to accept that they would forever be tied to her absence. But now, I knew I had to. I had to face the memories, to honor them, to let them become part of me again. First time I sat at that park bench, it was a bright and clear afternoon, the kind of day that always reminded me of her. I sat there, staring out at the water, and for the first time since she passed, I felt a sense of peace. There was no pain, no sorrow. There was only the soft ripple of the water and the gentle breeze that seemed to carry her presence with it. It was as though she was sitting beside me once again, her arm resting on the back of the bench, her voice in the wind. I let myself smile, a small, tentative smile, as I remembered the times we had spent here. The laughter, the quiet conversations, the way her eyes would light up when she talked about her dreams. I could still hear her voice in my mind, clear and strong, as if she was right there, whispering in my ear. And in that moment, I knew I had to carry that with me, that love, that connection. It wasn't something I could just leave behind. I began to reconnect with the world. Slowly at first, in small, tentative steps. I went back to work, to my friends, to the life I had once known. But I wasn't the same person I had been before. I was different now. Grief had reshaped me, and I wasn't sure what kind of person I was becoming. But I was learning to move forward, to honor the past while embracing the present. I had a new perspective on life, one that had been forged in the fires of loss. It was a strange thing how much a single person could change you. My mother had always been my anchor, the one who kept me grounded, who showed me what it meant to truly live. And now, even in her absence, she was still guiding me, still showing me the way. There were days when the pain would come back, when I would catch myself reaching for the phone to call her, only to remember that she was no longer there. Those moments were still sharp, still raw, but they didn't consume me the way they had before. I had learned to sit with the pain, to feel it, and then let it pass. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I couldn't run from it. And then there were the days when I felt truly alive, when I could hear the rustle of the leaves in the trees, and feel the warmth of the sun on my skin, and know, without a doubt, that my mother was still with me. That love, the love she had given me, was still here, woven into every part of me, into every part of my life. It was a quiet kind of rebirth, this reawakening. It wasn't dramatic or sudden, but it was real. I had thought I would never be whole again, that I would always carry the weight of her loss with me, and in a way, I would. But I was learning that grief didn't have to be a burden. It could be a part of my journey, a part of what made me who I was. And as I embraced that, I found that I could carry on, that I could move forward. It wasn't goodbye. Not really. It was just a different kind of love now, one that didn't require physical presence, one that didn't need words to communicate. And somehow, that made it even stronger. It had been months since the moment when I first heard her voice. Months since I had felt the touch of her hand in the air around me, since I had sensed her presence in the smallest of things. And yet, despite the passage of time, I still found myself in awe of the way she had never truly left. I had always believed that death marked the end of something, that it was the final chapter in a story that could never be rewritten. But now, I knew better. She had not left me. She had simply changed form. She was no longer a physical presence in my life, but her love for spirit was woven into every part of me. Some days, I would sit by the window, staring out at the world, and feeling a deep sense of connection. I had come to realize that she had always been a part of me, in the way I thought, the way I acted, the way I loved. Every lesson she had taught me, every piece of wisdom she had shared, was now a part of my very being. She was inside me, in every thought, in every choice, in every quiet moment. And in that, she would always be with me. I had found a new rhythm in life, a way to honor her memory while moving forward. There was still pain, of course. There would always be pain, the kind that comes with love so deep that it seems impossible to imagine living without it. But there was also peace. I had made peace with the idea that I didn't need to say goodbye to her. Not truly. She had left behind a legacy of love, of strength, of kindness, and, It was now my responsibility to carry it forward. The more I thought about it, the more I understood. The love she had given me wasn't something that could ever be extinguished by death. It was eternal, a thread that connected us beyond time and space, and it was up to me to keep that thread alive, to honor it by living a life she would be proud of. I began to make small changes in my life, not to move on, but to move forward. I started doing the things she had always encouraged me to do, but had never quite had the courage for. I took risks. I followed my passions. I pushed myself in ways I hadn't before. I could feel her cheering me on, her voice echoing in my mind every time I hesitated, every time I doubted myself. One day I found myself walking down the same path we had walked together many times before, the path that wound through the park, the one lined with trees that had stood for decades, watching over us. I used to walk this path with her, talking about everything and nothing, the world unfolding in front of us, and I could hear her laughter in the air, the same laughter that had filled my heart with warmth. It felt right to be there, to be walking in her footsteps, to remember the moments we had shared. I paused for a moment and closed my eyes, letting the sound of the wind and the rustling leaves fill my senses. It was then that I heard it, once, again the faintest whisper in the wind, a voice that was so familiar, so comforting. It was her. "I'm proud of you," she said, as if no time had passed at all. "Keep going. You're never alone." Tears filled my eyes, but this time, they weren't tears of pain. They were tears of gratitude, of love, of knowing that, somehow, she was still with me. I hadn't been able to see her in the way I once had, but I could feel her. I could feel her pride in me, in the person I was becoming, and it was enough. I understood now that death wasn't the end. It was just a transformation. She had moved into a different form, one that couldn't be touched or seen, but one that could still be felt. She had always been with me in a way I couldn't understand, and now I knew that would never change. There was no need to hold on to the idea of goodbye, no need to grasp at the fleeting moments when she had been alive. What I had with her was something that transcended time. Her love was a constant, a force that existed in every moment, in every breath. And as long as I carried that love with me, she would never be truly gone. The world continued to turn. Life moved forward, and I moved with it. But I was no longer the person I had been before. I had learned to embrace both the pain and the joy, the loss and the love, and in doing so, I had found a new way to live, a way that honored her memory without being trapped in the past. She had shown me that love never truly ends. It lives on in the way we live, the choices we make, the people we become. It lives on in every moment we share with others, and in every part of ourselves that we give to the world. I wasn't alone, not anymore. I had her with me, in every step I took, in every decision I made. Her love had become the foundation of who I was, and as long as I lived, I would continue to carry it forward, forever together, in a way I could never have imagined.